And so they were very attached to being with him and be his servants. In Los Angeles, Govindadasi continued as Prabhupada's secretary, with Upendra, his servant, giving him massage and cooking for him. Govindadasi's husband, Gaurasundar, had reluctantly left to open a center in Hawaii. He had begun with Prabhupada talking about Hawaii as a very likely place for a temple. He then prodded Gaurasundar day after day until finally he agreed to go there and preach. Now Prabhupada was suggesting that Govindadasi join her husband. She preferred, however, to remain with Prabhupada as secretary. She had been with him for over a year, but Prabhupada insisted that she go. From New York, Purushottama had written asking to come and serve Prabhupada, and Prabhupada had consented. When Prabhupada had written the letter asking Purushottama to come, he had given it to Tamal Krishna, saying, when Prabhupada had written the letter asking Purushottama to come, he had given it to Tamal Krishna, saying, you'd better mail this. Don't give it to Govinda Dasi. She may refuse to mail it. So she knew what was in it. She didn't want Purushottama to come. And she would leave. Govinda Dasi wanted to stay, but Prabhupada ordered her, you must live with your husband. That will make you happy. You will never be happy staying aloof from one another. You must go there. So after weeks of procrastinating, Govindadasi reluctantly left her cherished service and went to join her husband. And this Purushottama, he was with Prabhupada, and he was the one who got disillusioned when the United States landed the rocket on the moon. And he and Prabhupada said they didn't go to the moon. And Purushottama was like, what do you mean? We saw it on television. They went to the moon. And so he got very disillusioned. And he started neglecting. This was in London. Finally, it came to a head. And he started neglecting himself, neglecting his service and his appearance. And then Prabhupada would give a lecture or something, and Purushottama wouldn't show up for it, wouldn't be there, although he was Prabhupada's servant. And Prabhupada, sometimes he said, where is Purushottama? And he said, oh, he has gone to the moon. Anyways, that was a thing. Some devotees, the fifth canto, Prabhupada came out, and it's all description of the universe, and nobody could go to the moon. We never went to the moon. And so devotees, some devotees had some trouble with that, but maybe some left, like Purushottama at least left for a while. But what do we know about the universe? I just heard one lecture, morning walk with Prabhupada a couple of days ago, and he was talking about the universal affairs, and he was talking about, somebody brought up the statement in the Srimad Bhagavatam that there are big, huge birds that fly from one planet to another. And one disciple said, but Prabhupada, we've never seen such things. And Prabhupada said, what have you seen? You're just born. You've only seen your mother and father. And he said, what do you know about the universe, or timingal fish, or birds that fly from one or demigods. We accept so many things on faith. You have to accept so many things on faith, because we come to accept that Prabhupada is a representative of Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the most basic thing, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it requires faith to accept that. It requires great faith. And unless we accept, there's so many, and we don't understand anything. But never mind birds that fly from one planet to another, but even the most basic thing, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I'm an eternal servant of Krishna. Prabhupada is Krishna's direct representative here, and his disciples and grand disciples are in the disciplic succession, and present day disciples take shelter of them and becoming the most basic things require great faith, Shraddha, and that's the beginning, middle, and end of everything in Krishna consciousness. The devotees are faithful to Krishna. Without faith, nothing can happen. Without faith, you won't chant Hare Krishna more than a minute. Without faith, you won't follow regulative principles. Without faith, you won't follow any spiritual discipline. Faith is required, but somehow, and one thing Prabhupada said after Purushottama left him, Prabhupada said to other disciples, he even said, he said, I can see how he might not believe me, but how could he not believe the words of the Srimad Bhagavatam? And Prabhupada was, of course, what difference does it make? You might say Prabhupada is the person Bhagavat. The only reason we know the Srimad Bhagavatam is because of Prabhupada. But in this case, Prabhupada was even going to such an extreme that he differentiated himself from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he said, so Prabhupada had ultimate and complete faith in Krishna's words in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And anyways, that's a whole, crucial, super important topic of Shraddha. Everything is based on Shraddha. But I'll just keep reading now. Already inconvenienced by Gaurasundar's departure, Prabhupada was now further inconvenienced by the loss of his trained secretary. But he wanted new centers. Rendering personal service as secretary or servant was not a very important function, he said, but to go somewhere in the world and preach Krishna consciousness required a divine spirit, and whoever had this opportunity should take it as the greatest blessing from Krishna. Of course, rendering personal service to the spiritual master is a very important service, it's a crucial service, and devotees are always eager to have some personal service, and where a spiritual master has his own close personal servants and secretaries, he needs that because he'll be inconvenienced otherwise. But all the devotees, all the disciples are trying to get a chance to cook for a spiritual master wherever he goes, or clean his room, or make a garland for him, or iron his clothes, all kinds of personal service. And that's a great blessing. It's a great blessing, opportunity. But Prabhupada emphasized opening centers in the beginning, is the very beginning. And in order for his mission to spread all over the world, he needed devotees like Gaurasundar Das and Govinda Dasi to go to Hawaii and start a center. Go to London and start a center. Go to Australia and start a center. Now there are temples all over the world. And of course, devotees are still going to new places and opening temples. But in the beginning, there weren't temples all over the world. And Prabhupada wanted that. And if somebody had the guts and the ambition and the surrender and the divine spirit to go to a different city or a different country to open a temple, Prabhupada wanted it. He really, 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 really wanted that. He said, to go somewhere in the world and preach Krishna consciousness required a divine spirit, and whoever had this opportunity should take it as the greatest blessing from Krishna. So now mostly there are temples, and we live in the temple, we serve in the temple, and our duty is to mostly the duty is to maintain the temples that are already established, and of course start new temples in many different places. But for so many devotees, it's always been my position to just stay in one temple and help to take care of one of Prabhupada's temples. And that has to be done. Right? You need devotees, the adventurous devotees who go to new places and start new temples. And you also need the more sedentary people who stay in one place and take care of what's established. So, that's what I do, and it's what many of us do. And of course, you have traveling preachers and sannyasis, so that's also required. And Prabhupada gave that example from the beginning. ISKCON can't spread more and more and develop more and more without the traveling preachers and sannyasis. And so we have Mukunda Lila and Mother Devahuti and Radhesham Prabhu, and they travel and they preach in different places and inspire people and make new devotees. That's required too. All kinds of devotees are required, because everyone has a different mentality, particular mentality, and different people, devotees are needed to do all kinds of different things. Everything is important. Every service in Krishna consciousness is important. Washing pots is important. Worshiping the deity is important. Traveling and preaching is important. Everything is important in Krishna's service. Okay, so I'll continue reading. Let's see. This, you should take it as a great blessing from Krishna. Then Upendra, who was acting as his massage person and cook, I think, he received a prison sentence for a previous drug conviction years ago, before he had joined Prabhupada. It's probably for marijuana. And at first, the sentence was 3 months, but then it was reduced to 1 month in the county jail. When the day to leave came, Upendra packed his bag and went in to say goodbye to Prabhupada. Oh, Prabhupada smiled. You're going now? Yes, Prabhupada, Upendra said in a broken voice. Then he asked, Prabhupada, will you please chant 1 round with me? If jail is no joke. Any kind of prison is no joke. You're going to prison. You're going to be locked up in a cell for, in his case, only a month. But even 1 day in prison is heavy. A month is even 1 day. It's when they shut that door and you hear it click shut, and you're not going anywhere. You're in prison. And you're not going anywhere. And it's really heavy. A month is a long time. You say only a month, but that's a long time in prison. let's see. Prabhupada looked at him steadily and said, "You should know that I am always chanting with you." Upendra began to cry. He's just a young boy. He's probably 20 or early 20s. He's just a kid. And they started to cry. And Prabhupada reached over, patting his back and ruffling his hair. He said, "No, don't be afraid." Prabhupada assured him, "It is Krishna's mercy. They will think you are a pious boy and let you go after a few days. Go on now, chant Hare Krishna and be happy." Upendra took heart and left for jail. After 10 days, he was released, and after 10 days, not a month, he was released and returned to Prabhupada's personal service. So Prabhupada was right. They saw he was a pious boy and let him go after a week, 10 days. At this time, Prabhupada began speaking to Upendra about preaching in Australia. A devotee in New York had written Prabhupada about starting a center in Australia, mentioning Upendra's name. At first, Upendra was dead set against it, but Prabhupada smiled gently and said, "Yes, I think you should go." "But I'm doing your cooking," Upendra protested. "Oh, anyone can cook," Prabhupada replied. "You were doing better service in Seattle." "You're not joking then?" Upendra asked. No, Prabhupada wasn't joking, and Upendra left for Australia. Thus, Prabhupada gradually depleted his own personal staff in Los Angeles, but he continued to use the Los Angeles temple as a stage of introducing new important aspects of Krishna consciousness. One such precedent had been the downtown chanting party. Another was full-scale deity worship in the temple. It was in Los Angeles at this time that devotees began a full day's schedule of artis and offerings of prasadam to the deities, just as in the great Vaishnava temples in India. Jiva Goswami, a great scholar and follower of Lord Chaitanya's teachings, had written that although chanting Hare Krishna was sufficient in itself for going back to Godhead, because people in the present age are restless, they should also worship the deity for purification. Since the deity worship involved sewing dresses for the deities, decorating and cleaning the deity's altar, and cooking for the deities, Prabhupada turned to some of his women disciples who seemed particularly inclined. And this is in 1968. And in 1970, Satsvarup Maharaj tells about how Prabhupada was there in Los Angeles again, and he had personally told everybody how to do everything more like a established temple in India. And so they were doing really nice deity worship and all kinds of detailed things about the running of the temple. And Prabhupada said that all the temple presidents in the United States and maybe other places should go to Los Angeles and learn how to run the temple. And Satsvarup Maharaj, he was the temple president here in Boston, and he went out to Los Angeles and he took careful notes about how they did everything in Los Angeles. Because, in the beginning, nobody knew how to do anything. Nobody knew how to offer an artik. At 26 Second Avenue, when Prabhupada did his artik and offered his prasadam to his little deities there, the first devotees there, when they saw him doing that, ringing the bell, they called what he was doing, they called it bells. Prabhupada is doing bells. Nobody knew how to do anything. And so gradually they learned, and then Prabhupada, in specific times like this, he said, go to Los Angeles and learn how to do what they're doing, because I taught them how to do what they're doing. And one of the women who was inclined to deity worship was Shilavati. She was older than most of the other women and had joined the Krishna consciousness movement with her two sons. When Prabhupada saw her eagerness to help him establish the deity worship, he asked her to come to his apartment, where he explained to her the system of worshiping the deity with 6 daily artis. The first arati, Mangal Arati, should be held 1.5 hours before sunrise. But the deities must first be awakened, then offered milk sweets and fruit, then at arti consecutively offered burning incense, burning camphor, water in a conch shell, a clean handkerchief, a fragrant flower, a yak-tail whisk, and a peacock feather fan. The devotee offering the articles was the pujari. The pujari would ring a bell in his left hand while offering each object with his right hand, moving the article in clockwise circles before the deities. Breakfast is offered to the deities a few hours after Mangalarti. Afterward, all the devotees can take the remnants of that offering as the deity's prasadam. Then another arti is performed at noon, after which the devotees take the remnants for lunch. And noon arti, before major book distributions started up in the temples, the noon arti was generally pretty well attended. Whatever devotees were in the temple doing their service would come to the noon arti. And of course, the evening arti was very well attended. All the devotees came to the evening arti. I remember one of the first things that impressed me going to the old temple there, the end of 1970, was that there were like 50 or 60 devotees living in the temple, all young men and women, probably nobody. Well, Satsvarup Maharaj was about 28, 29, maybe 30, but almost everybody else was 18, 20, 22 years old. And but I was there in the evening before Sundar Arti, and the brahmacharis lived rooms were on the 3rd floor, and the temple room was on the 2nd floor, and there's wooden stairs leading down to the 2nd floor temple room. And just a few minutes before Sundar Arti, I heard like all the men running down the stairs. It sounded like a herd of wild elephants running down the stairs, and everybody was at Sundar Arti before the conch shell blew, before the not custom was, but the principle that back then was, not only back then, but was that you be at the arti before the curtains open, not when the curtains opened or after the curtains opened, but supposed to be, the servants, Radha Gopi Vallabha's temple, are supposed to gather in the temple room so the deities can see the devotees when the curtains open. And that's how everybody did back then. And that's how we did here before Mangalarti. When I moved in here, like 10 minutes before Mangalarti, we sang Udilo Arna and Jeev Jago, and then the curtains opened. every morning. And but one thing that really impressed me, another thing that really impressed me was that during the Sundar Arti, there was a really nice kirtan, and very enthusiastic. All the men stood on this side, and all the women stood on that side, and all the devotees. Everyone stood side to side, not facing the altar, but looking at the altar, but not facing the altar. And everybody, if you weren't playing kartals or mridanga or clapping your hands, everybody was dancing Swami step like this. And everybody was young and energetic and enthusiastic. And then, towards the end of the kirtan, it got going more, and devotees, there wasn't like circling and swinging people around in the middle, but there was enthusiasm. It was jumping up and down, and it was pretty fired up. It was very enthusiastic. I mean, really enthusiastic. Everybody was singing. Nobody was just standing there with their mouth closed. Everybody was singing and dancing, and I was like, boy, this is really incredible. And as soon as the conch shell blew, everybody bowed. Everybody did full dandavats and Jai Om, and then Nisringadev prayers, fired up, enthusiastic, and then immediately all the devotees sat down in rows, and then the Bhagavad Gita class, or the Nectar of Devotion class, and then Bhagavad Gita class for like an hour, and then it really struck me how it was like so impressive how all the devotees were dancing, and not wild, but borderline wild, dancing and chanting, and then as soon as it was time for class, everybody's like bang, 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 sit down and listen and pay attention, and they were really paying attention, and it just struck, it's an example of how a really good example of how enthusiasm and joy and chanting and dancing and feasting, along with the most elevated study of the Shastras, are all combined together in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, in the system of Bhakti Yoga. We're not dull scholars just sitting and studying the Vedanta sutras, and we're not just fanatics who just sing and dance all day. Sometimes people see religious people like that; they're just fanatics, and there are many religious people who are just fanatics. But in our tradition, in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, everything is combined together in a very cohesive, very compatible way. There's nothing incompatible in combining a very diligent study of the Shastras with enthusiastic kirtan. Anyway, I was so impressed by that. I was like, wow, these people are really serious about what they're doing, and it's all based on study and study of the Shastras. By the time I started going to the temple, I knew what the Shastras were. I knew what the significance of the Bhagavad Gita was, as much as I could understand at that time. I knew, so I was just so impressed by that one little episode. Okay, so I'll read a little more. The first, breakfast. Let's see. And there are 3 other artis at 4 in the afternoon, at 7 p.m., and another at 9 p.m. Then the deities takes. Understanding that the deity is actually the Lord and the proprietor of the temple, the devotee should serve him, just as a king is served in his palace. By doing this, the devotees would naturally increase their Krishna consciousness, but it had to be done with enthusiasm. Prabhupada cautioned that if enthusiasm waned, it could turn into drudgery and become like idol worship. The disciples would be sorry they had ever begun it. And I just heard a week or two ago Prabhupada lecturing about that point in about deity worship has to be done with enthusiasm. And he said, if it's not, eventually the disciples will think, oh, my spiritual master has given me a burden around my neck. Or what was it? Yeah. And he had a term for it. It was this, what? Galagaha. Yeah, so enthusiasm has to be there, and enthusiasm is maintained by all the practices, by living together, or coming together and worshiping the deities, chanting Hare Krishna, and by all the practices of devotional service, studying the Shastras, hearing lectures from Prabhupada, from your spiritual master, from devotees, and by going out to preach. Enthusiasm is definitely increased by going out on Harinam and book distribution and all kinds of preaching programs. Enthusiasm. So yeah, we have to maintain our enthusiasm. Nothing can be done materially or spiritually. Nothing can be done without an utsaha. It's the first thing that Rupa Goswami mentions, utsaha. Nothing, otherwise nothing can happen. Why should I do it if I'm not enthusiastic? Why should I go out? Why should I get up for Mangalarati? Why should I go out to go on Harinam? Why should I read the Bhagavad Gita? Why should I serve the deities with there's no enthusiasm? So Prabhupada always emphasized that. And after being instructed by Srila Prabhupada, Shilavati returned to the temple to prepare for the new worship procedure. Next Sunday, when Prabhupada visited the temple, he stood and watched Shilavati offering arti. Afterwards, when she joined the other devotees in Prabhupada's room adjacent to the temple, Prabhupada greeted her by saying, "Now we will have arti." Shilavati looked surprised. "Oh," she said, "but I just had arati." "No, you didn't," Prabhupada said. "It wasn't good?" she asked. "No, it wasn't good." Prabhupada then went into the temple and asked the devotees to bring him the various articles for offering arati. Standing before the altar, Prabhupada called out, "I want camphor." "What's camphor?" the devotees asked. "Where do we get camphor?" Nobody here knows what nobody knows what, I mean, some people might know what camphor is, but it's not. Someone immediately ran out to buy some. I guess the store must have been pretty close where you could buy camphor. Then Prabhupada asked for flowers. Item by item, the arti paraphernalia came together as Prabhupada, standing before the altar, directed the devotees to bring him each item. When everything was finally assembled, Prabhupada demonstrated how arti should be done. Then again, he turned it over to Shilavati. He had shown them, and now they should continue with enthusiasm. Going to start reading there. Does anyone have anything to say, questions or comments?
I had a question. Thank you for the question. Prabhu, in those days, the devotees had attended the whole morning program and whole evening program also we heard.
Yeah.
And morning after the prasad, they would go out on Sankirtan and they would come back in the evening and then take a bath or whatever, take prasad and then attend the Tulsi Aarti, Nrsimha and Gaur Aarti and then take hot milk along with Krishna book.
And nobody ate, generally, nobody ate a big meal at night. It was good if you were a guest going to the temple because the whole offering.
Okay, in the evening, what they would eat?
Well, mostly everybody just had hot milk with sugar in it.
Oh, evening when they come back at 5 o'clock.
Well, I don't remember exactly. I wasn't living in the temple at the time, but I would be there sometimes in the evening.
And they ate lunch at 1 o'clock or morning?
Yeah, lunch was like 1 o'clock or something. The devotees went out from Boston, went out to Park Street on the Boston Commons, and they would bring the devotees from the temple would drive prasadam out to them for lunch. I mean, I wasn't living in the temple at that time, so I don't know a lot of details. But when I was there in the evening, I only saw them drinking hot milk.
Actually, they eat lunch at 1:30, then they can take out. I don't think they eat in the evening.
Yeah.
Another question I had was about nowadays a lot of our energy time goes in counseling the people, devotees are coming.
Yeah.
Because devotees feel weak due to the onslaught of outside world.
Yeah.
I think that is one thing that drains any of the devotees' time and energy and attention. And another thing is the Shastric study, the Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta. At that time it was.
They didn't have that. There was classes. Prabhupada suggested those things, but almost all the devotees, I'm sure that there were some very studious devotees who read more, but generally everybody is morning and evening class, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion. And devotees used to read on their own because the books were coming out one by one or at the time, and devotees were pretty fired up to see a new book and they read it. Devotees were pretty studious at that time, and devotees were pretty well read, but there wasn't any program for reading an hour a day, or and sometimes places Prabhupada recommended it, but in most places he recommended you go to Srimad Bhagavatam in the morning and Bhagavad Gita at night, and read when you can. That's basically how it was. Well, when I was going to the Boston Temple and when I moved in here, right after Sundar Arti, there was like 15 or 20-minute nectar of devotion class, and then Bhagavad Gita for like 45 minutes or so, one after another. Yeah. Well, when I moved in here, it wasn't a general thing in ISKCON, but here in Boston, we had 2 classes in the morning, one right after the other, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and then Bhagavatam class, and it was a total of about an hour and a half. Yeah.
And the morning program started at 4:30?
Well, 4:30, I can't remember.
And then you used to go till 9:30?
Yeah, it went till, I can't remember that either. That was a full morning program. Yeah.
You mentioned devotees age 18, 20, 22, they
Yeah.
came and stayed in the temple.
Yeah.
What is that motivated them to leave everything and come and stay? What was the force?
Well, Prabhupada was the force. That's how ISKCON happened. Devotees were attracted in the beginning to Swamiji, and then it became known as Prabhupada after a couple of years. But the only reason that ISKCON developed, the devotees did anything, up to leaving everything and living in the temple and giving up everything was because of Prabhupada. His influence was so attractive and powerful.
Even many of them didn't meet Prabhupada still.
No, yeah. Many devotees didn't meet him, but his disciples were very transparent via mediums to Prabhupada. As soon as you came to the temple, as soon as I came to the temple, I was 18, and devotees started talking to me. And the first thing was, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is a blue cowherd boy. And Prabhupada is his pure devotee, his representative here. And he's his pure devotee. He explained what a pure devotee is. And everybody was always talking and about Prabhupada as much as they were talking about Krishna. And that's what made ISKCON. It's the only reason ISKCON happened. It's a miracle. A really, really big miracle. Okay, let's stop. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. One Vishnu Hare Krishna Prasthava Satsrutas Goswami Krishna Prasthava.